This is Beyond the Resume, the podcast that brings you the stories, advice, and insights behind some of the most successful people in real estate. Beyond the Resume is brought to you by Jackson Lucas Executive Search, the industry leader in human capital solutions. Here is Chris Papa and Lisa Flicker.
Jeff, thanks for coming on the podcast. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, Jeff, are you from the Bay Area? I saw you went to Berkeley. Did you grow up here?
So I'm born and raised in LA. I grew up here, went to college in the Bay Area. I went to Cal, and then I lived in the city for probably about 6 years after that, and then eventually moved back down to LA. Really when we started Standard Communities.
Yeah, and like we were saying, I met, I've known Standard a while. I met your partner, Scott, a long time ago in New York when I used to live in New York. Yeah, I just love to I remember when it started, it was like this small, it was just, and now it's you guys are huge. I mean, you guys have acquired so much affordable housing. Can you just tell us kind of like, how did you guys meet and start this and the idea behind it?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I mean, it really did start super, super small. Scott and I were both living at the Bay Area at the time, and we were introduced via a mutual friend. We were really good friends, and Standard really started on a friendship basis. I was running a platform in the Bay Area called Jackson Square Properties, and Scott was at Stockbridge at the time, working in private equity. I originally first came to Scott and said, hey, I think there's a real opportunity to start something here. We kind of saw the market starting to turn south in 2006, 2007. Things seemed like they were really peaking. And it seemed, the Bay Area seemed less entrepreneurial for us than coming down to Southern California. I was a little biased because I was from LA, but it's just a lot of the Bay Area real estate was really controlled by a few various, high net worth individuals or families. And LA just had mass expansive areas coming down to the San Diego region, Inland Empire, everything else. And it just seemed like a place that was a little bit easier for someone starting a real estate business to get started. And so, I approached Scott. I said, hey, let's leave our businesses and start something new down in Southern California. There was also really kind of at the time, a real opportunity of what was happening in the affordable world. Fannie and Freddie have been doing a ton in buying tax credits, and 2007 started and everything kind of hit a halt. And so we saw a big need in terms of jumping into that space when we started in 2007. And so we started, we both moved down to LA, and really it was like one deal led to another. We started really buying distressed loans is where we first started in 2007. Then we bought some assets in New York City and Harlem. And then started building the portfolio down the East Coast down to Washington, D.C. We bought some stuff in Phoenix, bought some stuff in Vegas, and then bought in Southern California. Before we knew it, a few years later, Scott had met his now wife, and she was working as a doctor in New York, and he was going back and forth to New York. And so we kind of said to each other, we were office together in LA for several years and said, hey, let's try and make this work. We're covering the whole country. We're both getting tired of flying on planes all the time. So why don't you go to New York and I'll stay in LA and see if we can kind of co-run the business together and expand across the country. And now we're about 30,000 units later. It's really it's grown farther than both of us really imagined, but
it's amazing. So when you said you went to Berkeley, I think, is that where you went?
Yeah,
so when you were at college, were you planning I'll do something entrepreneurial? Is that how you got into real estate?
It's really funny. So I definitely wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I knew that. My major has nothing to do with business whatsoever. I'm a philosophy major, right? And so
we could have some really interesting conversations.
Yeah, exactly. My dad always said, he's like, you were built for business because you got a degree in bullshit. So, I think that, but I, really kind of, I credit, my father hugely with, he refused to pay for my college education if I majored in business. And it was a huge point of contention between the two of us at the time. And he had this philosophy that, when you're going to school, you're going to get one time to go to school throughout your whole life. You're going to get one time to get a liberal arts education, and you can learn business on the job. You can learn what you need later. I'm sending you to school to learn how to learn. And I fought back saying, I'm going to, UC school. It's half the price. Like, why are you telling me what to do? Of course. But looking back, it was absolutely the best thing ever. And philosophy for me was really learning how to think. And a lot of I learned logical and reasonable arguments. And that really has been the basis of our investing style, right? And, you make a thesis on investing in a property. You're looking and saying, hey, this is why I believe this is going to go up in value. Here's my reasoning behind it. And that thought process is what's really stood us in good stead as we kind of think through our investments. And I think that we work with a lot of kids now that come out of different universities and colleges, and I really focus on how they think about problem solving. And that comes with that root of, my basic education. So no, I had no idea that's where I knew I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I did not know it was going to be in real estate, and I did not know that we were going to build an affordable housing platform. That all sort of happened organically as my career kind of developed.
How did you come out of school? Were you interviewing for just across? I remember coming out of school and I had no idea. I remember I liked real estate for some reason, and my uncle was a developer, but he had been a personal injury lawyer, and I'm like,
Yeah.
is that the route you have to get your law degree or something? And then I had no idea, and then I kind of fell into this one and that one, and ended up doing this, and it was really I had no plans of doing this, and I thought when I started, I'll just do this for a little bit and figure out what I want to do. But now, 20 plus years later, I mean, how did you kind of fall into or get into a real estate role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I was not a business major. I was not, I took a real estate class. I took a corporate finance class, at the business school. But I applied to jobs. I applied to a ton of jobs, and nobody wanted me with a philosophy background trying to get, an investment banking job, right? It was I was out of my mind. So I had been denied from tons of places that I applied. So I was kind of desperate to get a job, to be honest. And I knew I wanted to it was a summer internship, my junior summer of college. And it was maybe the fall. And I had in this real estate class I took, the professor asked if there would anyone would volunteer to be his apprentice during the school year. And so I volunteered and I was helping him. He was an economics professor and was doing a bit of real estate. And he was doing some research on the wine auction market. So I helped him do some paperwork on that and kind of the side gig. And he was on the board of a company called Lend-Lease Real Estate Investments. And so come summer, he recommended me to get an interview. And I first went in to meet the head of the office in San Francisco, and the head of the office said, look, we can't pay anybody. And I said, look, I'm not looking to get paid. I just need to get something on my resume. And I remember I walked in there with, there was an Excel book that was maybe 1,000 pages, right? And I walked in with the Excel book to the interview. And I said, hey, if you hire me, I will work for free. And I will know this book down cold by the end of the summer. I will do anything that's in this book and I'll be your best employee ever. And so he finally called back and said, I'm not really offering you a job because it's not paid. But if you want to come in and work here over the summer, you can come in and work. And so he gave me an opening to work there. And I worked there that junior summer. And then I knew the LA area and they were covering a lot of deals from Southern California. And they had just cut the Southern California office. So they didn't have anybody who really understood the Southern California market. So I was helping them out a lot with that. And they offered me a part-time position while I was going to school my senior year. And I was almost done kind of with all my classes senior year. So I kind of worked part-time for them and went to school my senior year. Then they gave me a full-time.
Pay you?
They did start paying me then. And then they hired me full-time when I got out of school. So that was my first job coming out of school. And it was a great experience. And what's funny about that is there's a woman, Catherine Talbot, who was at kind of the precursor to Boston Financial, which was I'm blanking on the name. I think it was MMA at the time. Lend-Lease had bought MMA, and she was working in the corner of the office doing tax credit deals and affordable housing. And at the time, I had no idea what she did. Right? And we joke about we got friendly and we've become friends for a long time. And it was always this affordable housing thing was off on the side. I was always curious about it. And I was doing all market rate deals. I was doing office. It was a great learning experience. It was office, industrial, hotels. We did every asset class. We advised for tons of pension fund clients. And I was getting tons of experience. I started to focus on apartments after, a year or two, but really this weird division in the corner. I was like, oh yeah, they do deals, they make fees, and we have no idea how they work. And I've worked together a lot, in years subsequent. So.
It's interesting. And being a philosophy major and getting into it the way you did, I wonder, does that have an impact on how you've created a culture, built the culture in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny. So our values at Standard today: sweat the details, we move with urgency, and we act with kindness. And I think, those three values, I think tie a lot to, someone that's come in with a background that might be slightly outside of business. But I think that I always felt, coming in as not having a business degree coming in, that I had to move with urgency. I had to sweat those details, had to get in there. And then the act with kindness thing is probably comes to the philosophy background.
Yeah. Where did you mentioned when you walked into the office or after the interview, you had the Excel book and you said, I'll learn this, I'll be your best employee. Where did that come from? Like, because we work with a lot of universities now. Like, we have the search business. We also have a university business where we work with a lot of universities. And part of what we do is try to help these kids. There seems to be a lack of that mindset in 99% of the kids coming out. I don't know if you noticed that in like analyst class interviewing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like, essentially we help them do things, but what a big part of what we do is help them with their attitude of like, it's not like a privilege. It's not their privilege that you work here. It's kind of the other way around,
Yeah.
And like,
yeah.
did you grow up with that type of environment or where did that come from?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I grew up, my father was a huge, he was in, the retail garment business and just he was a workaholic and, very, very, very driven. And so I kind of grew up with that kind of being drilled in my head. But I really like my opportunity being up in the Bay Area in San Francisco was, my family is from LA. I knew nobody kind of coming into the city there. And so I really wanted to make it on my own. And there's that hunger that I think is sometimes missing in what you're describing. We always we talk about it when kids come into interview, we talk about that fire, right? Does someone have that fire? Do they want to succeed, or are they just kind of there to punch the clock? And, it's interesting. We've really flipped now as a company. So all of our interns are fully paid. We do a program now where we're taking kids that come out of school or during internships and giving them kind of full-time positions and housing stipends as well. Because I think one of the things that I realized with my background too was that to do what I did was a privilege, right? Like to be able to go to a summer and not get paid, I was really lucky. And I think it's a unique combo to have somebody who has that fire, but also, my dad was able to say like, hey, I'll help you out, continue to pay for your housing in the summertime to, go in San Francisco. And I find a lot of the kids that we work with, and some of our best talent are people that have that hunger and desire, but don't have the courtesy of being able to kind of just work for free.
Right.
And so it's a huge differentiating factor. So we've tried to kind of level that playing field, and we've seen that we get more talent that has that hunger and fire that you're talking about. That isn't, it's a lot of times the kids who can just, afford to get the free job in the summertime, they're not that hungry and they feel like it's just going and getting a favor and everything else. So we've tried to flip that thinking on its head a little bit, in terms of what we do now. And we've seen really good success with that. But yeah, I think that somebody's got to have, the other component to it is I think I had something to prove. I have an older brother who's 14 years older than me and an older sister who's 16 years older. So they had already had jobs and were successful. And my brother actually knew somebody at the real estate company. He was working in investment banking and knew somebody there and had like put in a phone call. And so like, I think I really needed to like prove on my own that I could succeed with, brothers and sisters that were that much older and already had careers. And
Yeah, it's a chip on the shoulder. That's part of it.
And then, and kind of thinking about it as I think about it more, so I grew up, my father was in retail, had bought some real estate in, the late 80s, and in the early 90s got hugely affected by the savings and loan crisis and kind of and kind of real estate. And so I grew up, and a huge part of my background was going through my father's bankruptcy for years. And so then that probably went on it was all through high school and through kind of middle of college. And, we had been in our house, we lost the house, basically to the bank, moved into another house. And so I think some of that drives some of that motivation for that fire of like wanting to succeed, wanting to build back something that I, kind of saw, succeed. and wanted to make it on my own. And I think, when we talk to, when people come in for interviews and you listen to their stories, I think we really, part of that fire and that motivation comes from, something they want to prove. And a lot of times it comes from a personal story like what I'm just describing now.
I love that. And I feel like it is true when you talk to the students that you can tell the difference, right? And what I find when we interview is there's half of the students who are entitled, and then the other half who are like sound like victims. And so it's interesting to really talk to the students and help them to figure out, like, how do I just go in with grit? How do I go in with passion? How do I like bring myself in? So tell us a little bit about your portfolio.
Sure, sure. So, our portfolio is a national portfolio. It spans from Boston down to Florida to Hawaii. We're in about 23 different states at this point. It's about 30,000 units. It's probably about 6 billion or so of assets that we manage and control. And that's all within the affordable housing platform, that's Standard Communities. We also have a couple other businesses that Scott and I have helped found and start. So we have an SBIC private equity business called Skyline Investors that's about 3 years old at this point, in which it's a partnership with the SBA that is, we've raised our first fund and we're deploying right now, which is about 125 million of equity. And that's into underserved communities. And really where Standard is doing housing, our private equity business is focused on jobs in those underserved communities. And so we kind of felt it was a really, really interesting match between the two. And then, our third business that we have that's about 8 years in is a oil and gas business that's based in Tulsa, in which we are effectively producing natural gas and oil, which was originally developed, we thought was going to be a hedge with our real estate business. A huge part of our expenses were utilities. And so we first got into that business kind of thinking about kind of that as some sort of hedge to the real estate portfolio that we're building. And it sort of turned into its own business called Tallgrass Resources. But really, when I think about the three businesses overall, our specialty has been public-private partnership. Each one of those businesses is a public-private partnership of some sort. Oil and gas was the original public-private partnership. The SBA has been a fantastic partner in helping us build out that private equity business. And the affordable housing, we partner with HUD and all sorts of different state and local government functions to build that business. And I think our expertise has been bringing that private cap in to be able to build those businesses.
So on the housing side of it, like you have a tax credit, like I'm sure, is it broken down into like tax credit? Do you do like any workforce housing? Do you do like
Sure.
9% deals, 4% deals?
So Standard Communities, our full or affordable platform, is really built into three different verticals. So our three different verticals, we do new construction, which is we build new construction, a little bit more focused. That's much more local in its scalability. So we're in about 8 states there building housing. We're building about 10 to 15 projects a year. Our goal is to ramp that to about 20 projects a year. That's all using the LIHTC program. 100% LIHTC program, and all mainly 4% low-income housing tax credits. And then we have a division that we call AC Rehab. AC Rehab is really focused on buying older existing deals that are, we're looking to preserve existing affordable housing deals. All of those deals, we're using the LIHTC program as well. And a lot of those deals are also project-based Section 8 deals that we're working with HUD to reestablish those contracts, renovate those deals, trying to not increase rents on residents. They get the benefit of really renovated modern apartments and amenities. And so we'll do 10 to 15 of those deals a year. We do that nationally. So that we're doing that everywhere at the moment. So we've got some deals going in Hawaii, we have deals in Florida, all over. And that was really the bread and butter of our business when we first started, was those existing deals and preserving those deals. And then our last business line is called Essential Housing. And our Essential Housing group focuses on the deployment of private capital into various areas within affordable housing. So that's where we do some workforce housing deals, buy existing general partnership interests. One of the things we're really focused on right now is there's a lot of consolidation happening in the space, in which there's a lot of it's a bigger conversation, but it's a turning point in the industry right now, where a lot of older developers that have been around for a long time are exiting the space. And so that's the division that we're really working with capital to be able to aggregate various businesses and buy at scale. And so that's our other.
We're seeing that too. We work with a lot of big institutional investors. And we have one that's looking to buy platform, an affordable housing platform. We're bird dogging that deal because we know all the small ones who are, what partners looking to sell, what, retire. Yeah, it is. I started getting into affordable housing about 15 years ago or so. And the way it's just changed, the capital flow into it, the way salaries have increased, the level of talent and people in there. And it's been pretty amazing, which hopefully leads to more housing and more people living in the housing and more stability in communities. What do you think about, now with the lack of most likely federal money coming into a lot of these spaces, we have to find, the big talk is like, how are we going to find alternative sources of funding? You provide like you have a lot of private capital too, right? Are you going to,
We
we,
do.
we have a naturally occurring affordable housing webinar next week with 4 big shops participating as speakers. And that's the whole thing. It's like, we have to find other ways to preserve this housing stock, right?
Yeah, I really think it's a really interesting moment for affordable housing. Affordable housing as an industry did not exist when we started Standard. So we started Standard, we were doing programs within affordable housing, but as an industry, it just, that acronym kind of has come in over time. And then workforce housing is a new one that's, come in as well. And so it's been interesting to see all these things kind of develop over the course of the business. And I think there's some headwinds at the moment with some of the federal spending. But generally speaking, I was in DC, a couple of weeks ago, making the rounds, and I generally feel pretty bullish right now on where things stand. And I think that specifically for our type of setup in affordable housing, and you go back to our values, right? When I go back to moving with urgency and sweating the details, I think that in general, we have always prided ourselves on using less resources and executing quickly and bringing in private capital to kind of make up that gap, right? And so I think that is the story that policymakers today want to hear, is that, we're doing things cost effectively. We're doing things fast. We're doing things at scale. We're trying to reduce red tape and going through and do our projects. And I think that that's really the goal today that I've seen. There was a lot of noise, when the administration first changed over. And I think that's sort of settled a little bit now. And so we're starting to see, that they really do have, I think there was a lot of fear of what the goals were, but I think the goal really is to streamline and make things more efficient. And I don't think anyone's looking to get rid of housing. Everyone realizes it's a bipartisan issue, that, housing is an issue almost everywhere right now. And I think the groups that can step up to the call are the ones that will be most successful over the next 5 or 10 years and can do things, like, again, without the amount of resources. So I think the LIHTC program has been the most successful program in the housing space in the last 30 years in terms of producing housing. And I think both sides of the aisle realize that. So I don't think that's going anywhere. It's really, I think, a lot of these other sources of capital that have been coming in. And so I think we're focused on how we leverage just the LIHTC program to deliver the most amount of product as possible. And that means we got to do things at, as low a cost as possible. We're trying to build domestically in terms of our supply chains and materials that we're bringing in. And we're trying to do things at scale, because building 20 units here, 20 units there is not going to help solve the problem.
Well, one of the things you said earlier that was really interesting to me is that the private equity firm is helping you to figure out how to provide jobs for the communities, if I understood it correctly. And I feel like it's so obvious that would be just such, like, could you tell me a little bit about it? Because that's fascinating and it feels so obvious, and I feel like everyone should be doing.
Yeah, I think when we come into a lot of different communities and we work on various RFPs in areas, a lot of times our housing is helping to revitalize certain areas, right? And there's opportunities in these areas of a lot of companies that are having difficulty accessing capital to be able to grow as well, right? And so there's we hear about them all the time as we come in to do our projects, whether it's HVAC companies, roofing companies, window companies, could be an architecture company, could be whoever, right? And they say, hey, private equity is looking to write $50-100 million checks. We're looking for the $5 to $15 million check. And there's just not a lot of efficient ways. The banks have pulled back tremendously, and there's kind of a lost space in there. And so we saw a real opportunity to hit that middle market, to be able to provide growth capital to these businesses, still let them control, their. And so we do lending. We can do a combination of, anything up and down the capital stack with them, really focus on helping them to grow those businesses. And I think it's a really great story with what we're doing with housing in those areas, because I think it's a combination between the two.
Yeah, I love it. What about, I saw you're on the board of Merit Housing, right? Is that correct? Housing and Merit. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I serve on the board of a couple nonprofits. Housing on Merit, Scott and I helped found maybe a little over 10 years ago. We saw a need in the space, specifically surrounded around female veterans when we first started. And it seemed like a really solvable problem. And you go to some of these communities like San Diego, and the homeless population can be really daunting, and it seems at times like it's almost unsolvable. But you narrow it down to female veterans, and it was like a very quantifiable number. It was like there's 75, and we're like, oh, that seems like something we can really help solve. And so that's really where it started. And Housing on Merit plays a critical role in partnering with us on various deals in California and some other markets. And in doing so, it raises funds from our projects, and then we're able to redeploy those funds into various different philanthropic endeavors that it's engaged in. Some of them are grants for female veterans, housing grants. Some of them are, kind of facilitating other projects getting built. At this point, fast forward, call it 10 plus years. We have a fantastic CEO that's running it. Jamie Beckett is grown the organization now to, it's a $4 to $5 million a year, kind of nonprofit, works with probably 25 different other developers. Scott and I still sit on the board and help facilitate, helping it grow, but it's really taken on a life of its own. It's been really fun to watch as it's grown and kind of we've been able to put that out there in the universe.
One more. What's Inner City Arts? I looked at that too.
Yeah, so Inner City Arts is a arts-based nonprofit in downtown, actually started by my father.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, and I just started that one too.
No, I can't take credit for that. I can't take credit for that at all. But my father started it with another gentleman downtown. He originally went to just volunteer his time really while he was, it's super important to me because it happened really while he was going through that bankruptcy that I was describing earlier. And so he was volunteering his time down in Skid Row there was a school down there, and him and one other gentleman were making art, and the other gentleman's an artist. And so he developed a friendship and said, hey, why don't we get a space where we do this in Skid Row for these kids downtown? And so they rented a space. It happened to be over a paint factory, and they were walking the kids from the school to this space above the paint factory, and they were doing all sorts of arts projects. A lot of these kids didn't speak English, and English was a second language, and arts was really this bridge in communication. At the same time, they were cutting arts from the public schools in LA. And the fire department came in and shut them down because they were above a paint factory, and you cannot bring kids above a paint factory. And there was a big LA Times article written, and Mark Taper Foundation saw that in LA and then gave them a big grant. And they went and found a space in Skid Row in downtown LA. And fast forward, it's been around now for 30 years. It's, a 1 acre campus. I encourage anybody to go check it out. It's pretty phenomenal. They ended up engaging Michael Moulton as the architect, it really was Frank Gehry's kind of second in command doing the Disney Center downtown. And so the campus has won all sorts of architectural awards and it's been featured in, a bunch of different museums. And they service about 10,000 kids a year at this point from public schools. It's the only program, I think, in the nation where they bus kids from the school during the school day in K through 8 to come and do arts education at the school. They teach the teachers how to do that, and then they come back and they bring them back to the school. So I've been on the board for probably, maybe 15 years at this point, and really kind of it's a really awesome family legacy and something I'm super proud of.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's so rewarding to like chasing the almighty dollar is like at least I've learned is not like as rewarding as it's empty at some point level, and like having the ability to help other people. And it seems like, especially like the one where the one that really I found really amazing was trying to level the playing field with paying for housing stipends and stuff. Because that is like, we work with universities that are very wealthy private universities, and then we work with opposite public universities, first generation college kids, and it's like they both have the hunger and they're all really smart, but like the opportunities that's presented is just because they don't have money. They don't come from money. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's just, it sucks. And so Lisa and I try our best to try to give them the hand to try to get them to like connected to places. But it's like having a company that like provides us, that's so huge. You're literally putting your money where your mouth is, which is great. So thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I appreciate that. I mean, I hope, yeah, I mean, we've really built an amazing enterprise. We have a fantastic team, and I think that we have a social obligation to make sure that, I mean, we're in the housing space serving underprivileged communities. So if we're not providing job opportunities to people in those spaces, we're really doing something wrong.
Right. Well, if you ever want to put together any kind of a program offline, we should talk about like program for the students that are tenants in your housing.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, all right. That was just a warm up. Now we're getting to the really juicy stuff, Jeff. So you've just entered what we like to call the hot seat.
Oh!
I want to take that jacket off.
Should I take off the jacket?
Yeah, you might want to take the jacket off. All right, we'll start off. Want to start them off with an easy one, please?
Sure, easy one for you. Do you have, well, actually, I'm expecting something good because you are a philosophy major, so it might not be that easy. But do you have a book or podcast recommendation?
Oh, you want to give me a subject matter? I read a lot of books, so.
I read a lot of books around life. I read a lot like spirituality and stuff like that. That's kind of my jam. So maybe one around that world, like kind of.
Sure, I can give you a couple books that come to mind that I've read recently that I think are great. There's a book called Awe. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but it's really about the philosophy behind being in awe and the fact that we all need a little bit more awe in our lives, and kind of it's the psychology of what happens. You go out and you're in the woods and, you see a beautiful mountain range, or you're skiing and you see that and you kind of have that moment, and like what that does to you psychologically. And you have a tendency to sit behind a desk and you don't get that every day. And so I thought so the book is called, I have to look up who the author is. I'm blanking.
That's okay. That's a good one. All right, that one we'll take it.
That was a great one. And it's just about kind of finding awe in that every day. And then it ties it in specifically to kind of art, and the fact that if you tie statistically communities that have more art, and we look at this with our communities, in fact, you see less crime, you see more productive communities, people who have awe by seeing inspirational, creative things and just beauty. They, they are happier and they are better members of society.
I think, yeah. I mean, I see it in just even my town. There's like more murals going up all over the place. And even like and with Julio working at Mission Housing, we did a tour of one of his properties, and there's a big mural on the side of it. And it's just, yeah, it just makes it like, I don't know. I mean, I got to read the book to find out why, but it definitely makes it helps.
You're staring at a view every day where you're at. I mean, you probably have that moment of awe every time you look out the window.
That's why people live here.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
windows here. It's crazy.
Exactly.
So question number 2, you think back, what has been your most memorable deal? Was it the first one?
It's a memorable deal. Yeah, I mean, I think some of our early ones are pretty memorable. I mean, I think that I try not to get too attached to the deals in terms of the real estate. I think that for me, it's much more about the stories and people that you come across as you do the deals. But I will say that one of our first big projects we did in the Bay Area called Lakeside. So it was a 840 unit market rate deal that was just a standard apartment community, and we converted that to 840 units of affordable housing. And at the time, it wasn't, the rents were discounted from what was available in the marketplace. But fast forward 10 years, it became hugely discounted. And so a lot of the people that I've met throughout the years that found their housing there, that, while the Bay Area went crazy, and we had $1,500, $1,600 for a 1-bedroom. And, pretty soon that became $2,700, $3,000. And we were still able to offer that, kind of $1,500 to $1,600 was a really big deal for a lot of people that live there. And just on that scale, being able to produce that building. We also worked with the same architect who did Inner City Arts, Michael Maltson, who helped design the buildings as we did the project. So being able to bring that sense of artistic creativity into the project was really memorable. It had just the sheer scale. It was close to 50 buildings. And I remember sitting down with the architects when we first started and discussing that, your standard, you rewrap the buildings and we resited the whole thing. And as you do that times 50, it's going to just seem so monotonous, no matter what materials you choose. And the standard was you choose 3 different materials, you cycle them, every building is slightly different, you go all the way through, and he's like, it's going to be totally the same. So we did basically he created unique buildings. So what we did was we created all of the buildings as kind of a white canvas. And then we made special buildings and we wrapped them with kind of painted corrugated metal, effectively
cool.
spaced it out. And this is a really cool architectural project. And we spent a lot of time on the landscaping, the flow, the community feel. We built a new clubhouse and leasing center. We redid all the water features and put in new water features. And so that was pretty memorable project.
Where in the Bay Area is it?
It's in San Leandro.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Right off the freeway.
Yeah.
Well, with all this activity, I'm sure you've done a tremendous amount of hiring. I think creating a culture the way you have is hard too. So when you're hiring, is there anything in particular that you're looking for? Anything that you've asked people when you interview them that you find is helpful to see inside of someone's soul or something?
Yeah, it's funny. I have my standard questions when we do interviews, but I think I try to be really observant when I have the interview, and I look for things that people aren't saying in some way. So you listen to the standard answers and various, but it's a lot of times one of the things my father actually taught me originally was I'll sometimes with certain positions, I will leave a mess like on the desk, kind of in front of somebody when they sit down for an interview, right? It might be to their left or the right. And, it's interesting whether they clean it up or not. And some people feel really compelled to clean that up and some people don't. And, you can talk about all the stories, but I think that, in a position where you're looking for someone who looks at the details and, kind of is really, urgent about things in terms of building our culture, some of those things kind of come out as you kind of have your interview. And I think that I talk a lot about with people, I try to talk about as much as you can because people are nervous in interviews, but failures and kind of recovery and what people learned from those things. So I like to kind of hear about people's takeaways on those failures. A lot of times you'll get very canned answers that are like, they were failures, but they sounded like they turned into a huge heroic,
Yeah.
They turned it around and, it ended up being amazing and it wasn't that big of a failure. And, it's like a canned answer. But I like to get them a little bit off script and try and understand, because I certainly had tons of mess ups as I was learning and growing in the business. And I think it's all about being able to grow and learn from those things.
My favorite one is, what is your weakness? And then the answer is, I just work too much.
Right.
Yeah.
That's always the answer.
I work.
I'm a workaholic. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like my friends, they can't hang out with me. No, I'm still working all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this one, it seems like you've had a lot, like your father seems like a mentor to you. Like what other mentors have helped you along the way you'd like to give notice to?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I worked for, a gentleman in San Francisco by the name of Tom Coates, who worked for a number of years. He was super tough. But I learned a lot, from him. Especially on the deal side. And I think that anybody who's coming in real estate as, and entering the field, you really need to learn the basic principles and analytics behind the space. Mentorship is so important. I mean, I can't stress it enough. I mean, I think learning the dynamics of leverage in relationships with different government entities, understanding where to apply pressure, where not, litigation, all those sorts of things. I mean, you learn that a lot through mentorship. There's nothing in a book that's going to teach you a lot of the skills that, sometimes you need to kind of just push the football down the field, that extra yard. And I think that, he certainly provided that for me in San Francisco for a number of years when I worked for him. And I think that I have another couple of friends that, have been advisors for me over the years that, I call for counsel and, have been in the space for a long time. And, it's nice to talk to people that have been around for 30, 40 years, in the space and been through the trenches to compare notes and talk about stuff.
Yeah. We don't ever do this alone. Takes a lot of help. Well, Jeff, I mean, it's been amazing getting to know your life. I kind of envy a lot of the things you're doing. I think it's awesome. Lisa and I try our best to give back as well. And, thanks for coming on here and building an amazing company and companies. And next time in LA, I'd love to hit you up and get to the launch or something.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Resume, a Jackson Lucas podcast where we take a deep dive into the career journeys of some of the top minds in real estate and equip you with the knowledge to move forward in your path towards the success you've envisioned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume. We're grateful for your support. All episodes of Beyond the Resume are brought to you by Jackson Lucas, building inclusive and diverse businesses through talent acquisition. Visit us at jacksonlucas.com.